In between, listen, an hour ago, Sarah and I were recording some ads. In the interim hour, something like very exciting has happened. Do you want to hear what it is? It involves me being lazy, but here's what it is. We just made our last college payment.
Jennifer.
I know. Everybody, when you open these college accounts in your state, they are called
The 529s.
The 529, right?
I'm familiar with my
You are familiar with
small
yours.
one.
Yes. Well, everybody, listen, here's what I'm going to say, everyone. We didn't start Little Romances till he was about 10 because we were fucking broke like people are, right? And I was like, we can't do this. And then, like, we started really small. And it really, by the time he was in college, even starting that late, I was like, wow, there was a lot of money there, right? And then we kept saving in it. Kind of all through college, we were basically putting money in to take it right back out. Now, listen, it's legal. But what we would say in our house about this is launder your own money with the state of Illinois.
It is legal, everyone. 520. This is how 529s work.
Yes, this is not racketeering. It is legal.
So you put the money in, it's tax-free up to a certain amount, and then you take it out.
Yeah. So it helps on your state taxes. Okay. So anyway, we are at the point though where like the money was just sitting there. But on September 25th, which is next week, the Illinois Bright Start Direct Sold College Savings Program will transition to a new program manager. And I've been getting these emails that are like, here's what you're going to have to do. Here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to download an app. You're going to have to do all this stuff to like get the new account online. And today I was like, I wonder if I could just like close this sucker out before I have to deal with that.
Under the wire.
I called financial aid first and they were like, what you really need to do is to call student accounts. And I was like, okay. So I talked to a nice woman in student accounts and I was like, so look, I'm real lazy. And what I'm trying to avoid here
all this to pay one more payment,
to pay one more bill. I'm not going to put any more money in. And she was like, you can hear the laughter and someone. Yeah, exactly.
You could advance pay. Yeah, I'm sure they're like, I'm sorry, you'd like to give Wesleyan more money? Thank you. Yes, we're happy to hold that.
Sure. I'm sure they're investing it or something, whatever. So anyway, I then, cleared this plan with Mr. Reed's Romance. I was like, can you see any downsides to this? And he was like, no, absolutely not. And so I just was like, yeah, there it goes. Boom.
I am honestly really proud of you.
Listen, I am proud of us too. Paying for college is no joke.
Yeah, you did. You did the thing, man. Way to go.
I know. So anyway, I was like, look, what an exciting hour I have had is what I'm trying to say.
I really thought you were going to tell a totally different story, but instead you told this great one. So you must feel very relieved.
Like words cannot describe. All I need to do now is become a functioning adult and get a job, which seems like
that's asking a lot.
You know what, though? Here's the great news, everybody. That's his problem. Not my problem anymore.
I like how you say that, like it isn't your problem, Jen.
Look, he can live in my house. That's fine. That's not a problem. We have, he has a room. Yeah. Fine. But like in terms of like what happens next for him, his problem, not my problem. Okay, so Sarah, I'm excited about our topic today. Do you want to tell everybody what they've won?
Welcome, everyone, to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them. And I still have a growing 529 plan.
Yes, I am Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor, and I no longer beholden to the great state of Illinois or their Bright Start College program. That's where we are today.
I have good news today, too, but you already know it.
I do know.
Which is that I got feedback from other people who have read my book today, who work at the publisher that I am now publishing with. And everybody really is enjoying it. And that gave me a lot of joy.
No kidding.
Anyway, point is, These Summer Storms is real and it is coming in the summer, but you can't pre-order it yet. And I don't have a cover. So it's a mystery. But, we're moving forward. It felt like today we had a movement forward.
A breakthrough.
Exactly. What are we talking about today? Oh, well.
A really fun idea.
It's been on the list. So you all know we have a list.
Yes, there's a power list.
And if you send us an idea, I know sometimes it seems like you leave us a message on Instagram or you pop something into the Discord, and it seems like it just never comes to fruition. I promise you, it is on a list somewhere. Because we are not as creative as it seems, and sometimes we do, like, somebody has a great idea, and that's that. But This one has been on the list for a long time, and I'm pretty sure it came from us because we both happen to really enjoy this. But today we're talking about kidnapping in romance. And by kidnapping, we basically mean like light kidnapping.
A little light kidnapping, yes.
We're not like dark romance girlies. We see you, but this is not, none of this is going to be like, you know, I don't know, bag over the head, duct taped in the car. I mean, maybe a little duct tape, but like some light duct tape. Like fun duct tape.
It was funny because some of my favorite books have like a little light kidnapping. I mean, every good Lisa Kleypas ends with a little light kidnapping. And, Sarah, so does a certain dickbag named Bourne.
Begins with a little light kidnapping again.
It begins.
And it is light kidnapping.
Yeah, but he does say something amazing, which I wrote down because it really made me laugh, which is, restraints are for amateurs.
Does he say that? That fucking asshole.
He is such a dick.
He really is.
I thought maybe
he tosses her over his shoulder and just marches her to her ruin.
Yes. And look,
I mean, she's
wasn't even
fine
mad about it. Yeah.
She's fine.
So I think
that's really that's what we really are getting at when we say a little light kidnapping. Like, kidnapping, we're like, she's really fine. Like, no one's super worried about what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. I was also thinking that there's like most of my books, I think, like this. It is like kidnapping as inciting incident rather than like kidnapping as like wrapping up the plot.
So you mentioned Lisa Kleypas. I was not going to go deep into it, but of course, Lisa loves a kidnapping at the end of a book.
At the end of a book. And most of mine are at the beginning. And I was like, maybe we can talk about that.
Lisa, I mean, as you all know, we could talk about Lisa Kleypas ad nauseum for hours. We could do an entire season just on Lisa Kleypas.
True.
I would recommend, if you really are interested in like the full banana of Lisa Kleypas, head over to our friends at Learning the Tropes. They did basically every Kleypas book because Clayton loved her so much. So head over there. They've got deep dives on almost every book. So I had It Happen One Autumn and Devil in Winter, the duology, if you will, of those two, because Lisa's one of the cornerstone things in, textbook Kleypas is the third act, the way she deploys a villain in the third act. And I think it's like a nod to her old school roots, but also there's something, I mean, she's just a great storyteller. She understands that sometimes, like, in the third act, you need just like a touch more jet fuel to get to land the plane.
Right.
And I think she's also very fearless, especially in her pre-Ravenel books. She's fearless about that third act. Like, she will just, whatever the idea is, she's just in it. She's laid the seeds or the threads of a villain, and the villain is going to swoop in and like fuck shit up so that the hero can lose his mind, because all Kleypas heroes are protectors, right? So, in It Happened One Autumn, there's a classic Kleypas ending where a character named St. Vincent abducts
that dirtbag.
abducts the heroine is a fucking villain.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Threatens assault, like ties her up in the carriage and like takes her north, in the theory being he is going to, quote, ruin, that's a euphemism, her between here, London and Scotland, and then she will be forced to marry him over the border. Of course, this gives her hero an opportunity in that book to lose his ever-loving mind.
Sure.
And then race to save her. And then she does that thing that Lisa can do, which is takes the villain, turns him, 90 degrees, and then makes him the hero of the next book. And at the very start of Devil in Winter, which most people in romance have read, but if you haven't, listen, you are about to have a great time.
Yes, agree.
There is a reason why this book is on the top of every, like, best of the best lists. St. Vincent, Evie, the heroine of Devil in Winter, goes into St. Vincent's lair and basically says, I would like for you to kidnap me.
Yeah.
Because she needs a husband and fast.
Right.
So, I mean, Clapus kidnapping, it's just...
It's like peanut butter and jelly.
Exactly. Hand in hand.
And even it's interesting because I was thinking, even in the Ravenels, where she really has like backed off sort of like this kind of setup, in marrying Winterborn, right? It's not the hero. It's the hero who essentially has her lightly detained. Right? Ransom shows up and like
it's inconvenient.
Yeah, right. Ransom shows up and makes sure that she misses her train and kind of like keeps her in this room until Winterborn can like scurry over and tell her not 5 fucking minutes you're gonna be without me.
Like
right? But it's not
like
a kidnapping.
Like a quarter of a teaspoon of kidnapping. Just barely even there. You don't even know.
Exactly. And I will be honest, a lot of my favorite books are like kidnapping in that sense, like, right? Like,
where
you
the
wanted
heroine
to do
is
some
pissed. She is like, would you please? I am trying to leave. And usually it's like a second in command who's like, I'm so sorry.
Well, this is...
But no.
Listen, and this is why I love The Master by Cressley Cole.
That's on my list too.
And of course, we were going to talk about like IAD. There's a lot of kidnappings, but like in The Master, she shows up as like essentially as a sex worker, right? And they have sex and she leaves, and then she comes back for a second time, and then he's like, his minion is like, you can't leave. Boss wants to keep you. And she's like,
yeah.
What do you mean?
What's interesting about that whole series is they've all sort of been kidnapped but don't know.
Yes.
Like, they're not aware of the fact that they definitely can't leave.
Yeah. And she, in this case, in The Master, which, listen, you all, it is like one of my all-time favorite romances. The first time I read it through to the end and then just went right back to the beginning. I read it in a loop for like days. She is, her ex is after her. And so she thinks to herself, hey, you want to keep me in the lap of luxury up here at the top in the penthouse of this beautiful Miami hotel where I can get anything I want and know that I'll be safe? And he doesn't realize that is kind of why she doesn't really put up that much of a fight. So it's like also really smart, right? Like he's like, I kidnap you. And she's like, that actually worked for me. So yes, I agree. Yeah, and I do think that that's like one of the things about like a little like kidnapping is in everyone that's kind of like one of my favorites, right? It has either something like a little twist to it, something really like something funny about it, or just like, restraints are for amateurs about it.
What an asshole. Everyone, that's my book, A Rogue by Any Other Name. It's the first book in my Casino series. Bourne is a real fucking asshole.
Oh, yeah. And she says, I mean, I love this scene. I like went back and reread it today, right? And she's like, this is kidnapping, right? And he's just like enjoying it. You can't kidnap me. And he says, I have no intention of kidnapping you. I intend to marry you, darling. Right? And, that's when she says, I'm leaving. And he's like, no, you're not. I'm not restrained. I could leave if I tried. And that's when he said, restraints are for amateurs.
And then he goes down on her, right?
I encourage you to try, he said. Right?
And I was like, I'll keep you here by going down on you. Because
sure.
There are ways.
Sure. I will restrain you with my tongue. A true hero, everyone.
Listen, there is a reason. There's a reason why he did not get thrown out with the wash that day.
Right? No.
Okay, but here's the thing. So I realized like when I sat down to make this list, I made this big list and there are a lot of old school romances on my list. Yeah. And I have to say 2 things before we get into this. One, old school romances must be, if you've listened to this podcast ever before, we say this every time we talk about old schools, they must be approached with caution.
Yes.
I have not reread most of these books recently. And so I urge you to check content warnings and also kind of like be prepared for whatever the fuck is going on inside these books.
Yeah.
Did they install my buttons? They did. Have I been doing a lot of work to unlearn like a lot of the stuff that was buttons for me? Yes. Am I often shocked by the amount of ism and phobia that is in these books? I am. So, but if I'm recommending a book, it's because at some point in my life, like
I was like,
that is just a big piece of the puzzle for me. I do have a number of pirates on my list because of course I do.
Of course.
I mean, pirates that's one of their skills. Sailing, parrot care,
Sure.
eye patch use, and kidnapping.
Obviously. 100%, Sarah.
So listen, pirate books too, just proceed with caution. And that's our
content warning on this episode. Exactly. Can I tell you one other really funny story? So I have a romance group chat with like my Chicago friends. And so sometimes when I'm like, we're doing an episode, I'll kind of be like, what are you, am I forgetting anything? Like, and this is like Kate and Hannah and Julie and Sam. Sam is not a Chicago person, but she is on this group chat. And then there are two Julias. It's a confusing time. Anyway.
It's complicated.
So this is like a really funny story. So I was like, okay, you guys, when I say A Little Like Kidnapping, what book comes to mind? And Kate said Gentle Rogue. I was like, okay, fair. And then there was this whole conversation about like, was it kidnapping? Legally, he was within his rights. Hannah said, not even a misdemeanor, right? Kate said,
if you bring a lawyer into these conversations, forget it.
Right. They were married, but he did put her over his shoulder and tie her up, right? And I was like, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. And there you go, the pirates.
Yep. I mean, that is the thing. So I will start with some pirates. I did leave off. Everyone is out there. There is certainly some old school romances that like I absolutely left off because we have something coming up, an episode coming up that I'm saving them for. So there is also that. So you will notice some things glaringly missing from the batch. Yeah, I'm ready to go when you are but I think should we start old and then move forward?
Yes. Agree.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Jenny Barra, author of The Foul Out.
So Kyle Bosco is your typical professional athlete, Sarah. He's a baseball player. He's a bit of a himbo, maybe. He's a real competitive, sometimes some might even say a bit of a competitive jerk. And all of this would have been fine, except he had a bit of a meltdown and the media really called him out for it. And he just like couldn't let it go, right? And so he had to atone, in order to atone for his comments, he ends up working essentially or volunteering at a daycare. And he really hits it off with this one little girl named Piper who is like, oh, you're my best friend now. And he's like, I am not your best friend, but what I am is someone who thinks your mom, Harper Wallace, is super hot. So Harper is this gorgeous single mom. She fiercely is going to take care of her kids, and she herself can be a little combative. So sparks really fly when these two meet. And, but for reasons Kyle doesn't really want to get into, Harper is off limits, but he just cannot let go. He's so competitive. There's like no way that he's going to like let Harper get away from him. So we've got this big time like reformed playboy looking maybe to finally find the right family for him.
Oh, I love it. Well, if you love a single mom and a hot baseball player, this one is for you. You can pre-order The Foul Out by Jenny Barra in print, ebook, or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. The book arrives in Kindle October 11th. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to pre-order the book. And thanks to Jenny Barra for sponsoring this week's episode. I want to start with The Windflower because I feel like that is a book that we should have talked about on the podcast before, and we never have, and that seems like a glaring omission.
Sure.
The Windflower was written by Laura London, who is actually a married couple, Sharon and Tom Curtis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they wrote under this pseudonym for a long time and then came out as a husband and wife writing team. And The Windflower is another one of those books that when you speak to people who started reading romance in the 80s, it's often listed as one of the really base texts for them. So the premise here is, so our heroine is named Mary,
Sure.
Merry.
Of course.
And Mary is misunderstood. They think she is a traitor and a spy for the crown. She is not. She's just a normal person. I mean, she cries a lot. So she's a normal person for a 1980s romance heroine, right? She is abducted by pirates. Who are led. The ship is called the Black Joke. The Black Joke. And the brother, there is the pirate captain is a secondary character, but he is the brother of the hero, who is an English peer, who is also a spy, who's working for the British government and pretending to be a pirate, because they always are. They're always
pretending to be a pirate.
Pretending to be pirates. Okay, she is abducted by pirates. She almost drowns. And then she gets malaria over the course of the book. She almost dies. Amazing. There's a whole thing where she almost kills somebody by accident trying to save him. He is just exasperated by her from the jump. It is perfect exasperated man. And then once they realize, she swears she's not who they think she is, and they don't believe her until they're well out of port, right?
Okay.
And then they're out of port, and then they realize, oh no, this girl is she's really just incompetent at everything. And so they're just stuck on a boat with this person, and they have to keep her because if she's seen what they're up to, she's in on everything, they can't return her. And so his brother, who is the captain, is very acerbic and he's a pirate king, right? So he's all those things. And definitely young Sarah was when do I get that man's book? But the reality is that it has one of your favorite things in it, Jen, which is there is a moment late in the game where the hero, Devon, is just he has had it is the third act breakup, and he's just ready to be rid of her. And he does something very cruel. And the entire ship's crew, every pirate on the boat is no, you don't get to treat her that way.
Yes. I am so locked in right now.
They all defend her, right? She gets malaria. They're in there. She's crying. They're
I love this.
We got to protect our sweet baby, Mary. Anyway, so The Windflower, it's an absolute delight. It is if you have that sort of, empty space in the early texts of the genre, it's a good place to go to. Sharon and Tom Curtis write a great book.
I love it. The Windflower. I'm sure I've read that. The minute you said malaria, I was
The cover is terrific.
I was I remember malaria. It's funny. I did not put a ton of real old school ones on mine because
I'll cover that.
I figured you would. I will say because I was also a little Kidnapping, but I feel I got this from Garwood.
Of course you did.
Right?
You got it from The Secret. No, Honor Splendor.
Honor Splendor.
Yeah.
Is the one that I got it from. And
Guardian Angel too, I think.
Guardian Angel. There's a lot of just you don't want to go with me, but I'm taking you with me. I mean, even let's be honest, the bride, right? She's I'm not supposed to go with you. And he's you're coming with me. Right. Honor Splendor, though, everybody, I will say, I wait, is this the one? Okay, I think I'm correct. Is this the one? Okay. I do not really recommend reading this. I've reread a lot of Garwood's. This is the one where, if I'm correct, the subplot is a bad guy is her brother, and essentially it's because he's gay. It is like the kind of homophobic stuff that you can't even really like. It's, you were talking about the isms and the phobias.
It's not like it's not like they didn't know. It's like it's just it's not like a drive-by of like some fat shaming. Like it is baked into the entire plot. And I'm sure like many people had sort of forgotten. I'd read it so long ago and read it recently. But yeah, so I will say I remember, really liking the kidnapping, but cannot sadly I just
really
checked
recommend.
It up, checked it. This is a tough one to go back to. You are correct. This is
so I think it's worth mentioning just because I'm sure a lot of you are like, why aren't you mentioning specific titles? And I'm going to mention to you and tell you.
Sometimes you go back and you're like, oh no. I went back to one today too that I thought was going to work out great, and it was filled with racism, like filled with it. And it's a problem. So I want to name check McNaught, because also A Kingdom of Dreams, like literally is the setup is his second in command, like abducts Jennifer and her friend from the nunnery.
I mean, listen.
But listen,
in an old school romance, if someone's in a nunnery,
they're going to get abducted.
Obviously, there's no other way to do it.
Barely even abduction.
They didn't even want to be there.
They're basically being saved. Rescued from the nunnery.
Being rescued from the nunnery.
Listen. So here's the deal with that one. That is sort of the purest, like delightful, laugh out loud, funny, light kidnapping that I could think of in an old school, because it really is just like, here are beautiful women standing in the woods. I'll just grab them.
Sure.
But it's like, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be fine.
Yeah.
Because he's supposed to come get Jennifer, or he's supposed to come for one of them, and they're both there. And the guy's just like, well, I mean, there are two of us, there are two of them.
Sure.
It seems fine. We'll just get both. So there's that one. McNaught loved a kidnapping, though, because Perfect, which I've talked about before on the podcast, and really encourage everyone to go read because it's a contemporary written in the early 90s. The premise of that is the hero is a movie star who accidentally, like sort of Alec Baldwin style, accidentally murdered his wife on a film set with a gun that had a real bullet in it instead of a blank. And he was then like, basically he was the only one in possession of this gun the entire time. Nobody understood how this bullet had gotten into the gun. And he was prosecuted and convicted of his wife's murder. And he is so devastated by this false conviction that he sort of figures out a way to get himself to escape from prison. McNaught is a person who does not do romance reasons. Like it is a very clear, structured escape. We understand how he did it, how he pulled it off. And he gets to, so it is the dead of winter, and our heroine, Julie, is driving through snowy Texas with like her car and pulls off at a rest stop because it's starting to snow. And she goes into the rest stop, like for whatever she needs to do, comes out, and he has escaped from prison and like abducts her so that he can have access to her car. And then Jen takes her to a snowy mountain villa owned by his other wealthy friend in the high Rockies, where they have this like idyllic snowy mountain villa time while hiding out from federal marshals who are coming to get him. And of course it begins with, I hate you, how could you, you've kidnapped me. This is not like kidnapping. This is like real deal kidnapping. And then he like shaves, and she's like, oh my God, My brother had a picture of you on his wall when we were growing up, a poster of you on his wall. And she's like, he's this handsome movie star. And so then, of course, like movie stars, that's not it. I mean, like that. If you get kidnapped by a movie star, that's basically like being rescued.
Sure. I mean, I cannot argue with that, actually.
So I love talking about this book. I always recommend this book to people who want to understand like the truest, most beautiful version of a dark moment in a book.
Yeah.
The third act breakup in this book is possibly the greatest third act breakup ever in romance. I think Judith McNaught does it better than anybody, these third act breakups, but this one is just chef's kiss. And also I like to talk about it because Kevin Costner was at their wedding.
I love that. Yeah. Amazing. Right? Amazing.
So that's that. That's Judith McNaught, worth us spending time with, I think.
Sure. You know what's funny is there's a Silhouette intimate moments that I like.
Oh God, I didn't even think about category.
I mean, I like cut my teeth on these in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And there was one, I have never reread this book, but like because I know better.
Just don't.
I know better. But she was essentially like a border patrol agent. And she like witnesses a crime and gets kidnapped by the guy, right? And falls in love with him. And then it turns out that he was also undercover. Mm-hmm. Right. And so the whole time she's thinking like, I've fallen in love with a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And really, of course, he's like, no, I'm a good guy. You knew all along. And she's like, I'm not sure it works that way. And I just remember feeling like, boy, what a dilemma. But like looking back at this description.
Yep.
It's not good, everybody.
Listen,
it's not good.
You know what's really interesting? Silhouette intimate moments. Oh, God, those purple books with the white.
No, that's Silhouette special edition. Silhouette intimate moments were the white ones with the white.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. All right. Well,
here, I'm about to send you.
There's another one. You guys, there's a romance novel that literally installed every button that I have. It is by Sandra Brown, writing as Erin St. Clair. And it is, I mean, just so problematic on so many levels, but also has that prisoner escaped from prison, like a decent dude escaped from prison and then abducts the heroine because he needs her car. And then they fuck in the rain, and then he returns, he gets captured again, he returns to prison, and then he gets out 9 months later, Jen, and guess what happened?
I wonder, Sarah.
I mean, I don't want to do the math for you. I feel like I wouldn't like to ruin the surprise.
No, I mean, and that's it. Like, I was thinking, and I was like, I cannot possibly like mine these books or
no, I can't recommend that book either, but that is a book that I think about.
I think about like, and that's a problem when they install your buttons. There it is, Demon Lover, just waiting for that button to be pushed.
Oh my goodness, Demon Lover
by Kathleen Creighton. Everybody, here's the great part.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That Erin St. Clair is also a Silhouette intimate moments. That swirl.
Yeah, that like white one. The other thing that's great about this is like apparently he's like this real blue-eyed guy, but like this man on the cover has dark hair and a mustache.
A mustache. Call B into her books. She will be thrilled.
I had to actually the other day, like I saw something ridiculous and I was like, I'm sorry, everybody. I want to support you, but like some white men with mustaches just look wrong.
Yeah, agreed.
You can want it. Good luck to all of you, but no, I had to.
Because you know what the issue is? If you need that Tom Selleck lip.
Yeah.
If you think about Tom Selleck, his lip is easily like 1.5 to 2 inches, maybe more.
Sure.
That top lip. If he had that shaved off, we would be like, what's wrong with his face? But the truth is that that's how you get a great mustache. Like, you got to have a lip for it.
Sure. Anyway.
You got to have a canvas for that.
I know. I feel like this is what these people need to go back into, find these 80s categories. These mustachioed men are everywhere.
And also, if you're out there and you're partnered with a man and that man has a long top lip, maybe encourage a mustache growth just to see, just try it out. Let us know how it goes.
I feel like we should name check Prisoner of My Desire.
Yes, because yes, obviously. Kidnapping on both. She kidnaps him, he kidnaps her.
Yeah.
Kidnapping switcheroo.
Sure.
And then, of course, this is where to talk about Cressley, because then we move into Kiss of a Demon King, which everybody, if you're interested at all in this, you should go back to our season 1 episode with Joanna Shoup, where we talked about Kiss of a Demon King and how we are absolutely certain, though we have no proof of it at all, that Cressley Cole had her buttons installed by Prisoner of My Desire, because those two books read back to back or in conversation with each other, it's transformational.
It really is. Yeah, I agree.
But you want to talk about somebody who loves a kidnapping? Every fucking book. I went down the line.
I was like, no wonder we fucking love those books. How did we never put that together before? I was like, oh wait, this one. Oh, that one. Oh, that one.
Yeah. And the heroines are always like, you can't kidnap me. And the heroes are like, watch.
Watch me.
And that's that.
Is there a kidnapping in Sweet Ruin?
You know what? There is. And it is when she bites him and realizes that he's delicious. And he's like, oh, shit. Now she can read my memories. Like, he's worried that, like, she will know his plans. And then also he's like, but also what if I kidnap her? He has such a good idea, Jen. He's so smart. He's like, what if I kidnap her and I take her back to, like, my lair and I just, like, go down on her forever. And then, like, I'll just torture her sexually until she confesses. I don't know what. It doesn't matter.
What other choice is there, Sarah? What other choice is there?
There's no other way. It's just orgasms for truth. It's a trade. Except she is like, she doesn't know the thing he's convinced she knows something that she doesn't know. And she's like, well, I'm certainly not going to tell him I don't know it because this is great.
Same thing, same energy, right?
He kidnaps her and then she's just like, I'll hang out here. That's fine. Like, she stays kidnapped.
Yeah.
And then Lothair, Ellie gets sort of like taken, well, basically Ellie gets like kidnapped into a prison to just sit for a while. But then she gets kidnapped to the island with Ballery. And then McReeve, Chloe gets kidnapped. She wants out and they won't allow it. So, Cressley Cole, we see you. Every season we're like, oh, Cressley, we found this new thing that you really enjoy.
Like, we're so dumb. I love it.
Yeah. So, Cressley. All right, while we're here, all right, I want to talk about Lorraine Heath, because we all know Lorraine has done everything, and she's done everything probably better than everyone else, let's be honest.
Fair. So,
I want to talk about The Outlaw and the Lady.
Ooh.
One of her American set books. This is the American set series that came after the Texas series. Okay. This one opens with, I'm pretty sure her name is Angela. I should have looked it up. It's like Angela or Angelina. And she is like walking like at night through an town in the Old West in Texas. And unbeknownst to her, there is a robbery happening. And the outlaws, like when the robbers come running out of the bank with their like bags with dollar signs on them, they see her in the street and they're like, oh shit, she saw us. And so the whole premise is that the hero, Lee, is this like legendary outlaw who can
always
do whatever he wants and never gets caught, and his name is on everyone's lips, but no one's ever seen his face. And Angela sees his face because I don't know, he takes off his bandana or something. Sure. I don't know why. It seems like bad robbing on Lee's part here, but there's a lady in the street and he takes off his bandana and she sees his face and he's like, oh fuck, she saw me. Well, I guess I'm looting her too. So he like grabs her and throws her on the back of a horse, and they like ride out of town, whooping and hollering. I don't think there's whooping and hollering, but like Old West style.
Sure.
In my head there is. And then they get out to like whatever their camp, and they're like his cohorts are all like, "What the fuck, dude? Now we have this woman with us.
What are we gonna do with her?" Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, she saw me, and like, there's nothing we can do." And they had been like bantering the whole way, like she's on his horse and like bantering at him in like classic Lorraine Heath style. And then he's like, "She saw me. There's nothing we can do." And she's like, "I didn't see you. I'm blind."
Oh, listen, Lorraine, this woman's brain.
Again, everyone, I'm not sure. There's like, please acknowledge like it's probably not the best like blind,
Sure. We're not talking about representation here. We're talking about plot.
But she's like, "I'm blind. I've been blind for years since I was a child." And he's like, and they're like, "Cool, let's just leave her here to just the woods." And he's like, "No, we've bantered and now I want her." And then it's like chaos after that. There's like gunfights and like villains, and like turns out he's like Robin Hood and just after one particular bad guy, and it's very exciting. And
I love it.
That's The Outlaw and the Lady by Lorraine Heath.
Oh, good Lord.
I would like to spend some time with Lorraine at some point and just be like, "Could you walk me through how you plot a book?" Because I feel like she's just like, "Well, what if there's a bank robbery?"
Hot air balloon.
Hot air balloon.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by June Westwood, author of Grave Temptation.
Jen, I cannot. This is so great. You know how we sometimes say like, well, it's hard to tell like what the book is about.
Yeah, put it in your veins.
This is not that situation here. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Thomas Castle, scarred body and soul by a rough East End childhood.
Perfect.
Is no stranger to violence or vengeance, because that's basically his life's purpose. I mean, I'm in. Say no more.
Somebody made this right from the mold.
Exactly. So, okay, he has basically spent his adult life working to eliminate the crime organization that stole his youth, right, and basically ruined him. And one night, he is just out in Highgate Cemetery, quietly burying a kill, when, blink, blink, she blinks up at him with absolutely alive eyes.
Oh, boy.
And then he's stuck because he did not realize that this woman was quite so beautiful or quite so tempting or quite so fucking pissed at him.
Yeah, sure.
Lady Abigail Richmond has spent a lifetime being told what to do by men and was forced into an unthinkable engagement by her brother, who bartered her for a gaming debt, Jen.
I cannot like this.
She has a desperate escape into the night, gets caught up by this crime syndicate, accidentally murdered by Thomas, and then boom, is alive with him. And then it's the two of them against the world. He is fully unprepared, but she's basically like, "I'm a maid," big fat lie.
Sure.
And he's like, "Cool, I need one of those in my house." And now they live together.
Okay, so this debut is the first in the Victorian Rogue series. It has a dark hero, forbidden love, a secret identity, a wounded hero, emotional and physical scars, and revenge and redemption. If you would like to check this book out, it is available in print or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited and a special podcasting app, so you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. At the end of this week's episode, though, we have a special audio excerpt of the beginning of this book, so you can check it out. And I am sure that we are all, I mean, just fast forward to it now, honestly. Thank you to June Westwood for sponsoring this week's episode. Speaking of historicals, have The Hawk by Monica McCarty. Is that on your list?
Terrific.
Okay.
It is on my list.
Part of the Highland Guard series.
I like this series a lot. What if Navy SEALs were medieval? What if?
And working for Robert the Bruce.
Yep.
or whatever his name is, Robert the Spruce.
Perfect.
Sure. Anyway.
The Bruce. Robert the Spruce.
Sometimes I'm like, my brain, not
clever.
like Lorraine's.
So clever.
So in this one, this is the second of the series, Eric McSorley, or the Hawk, as everyone calls him, like the name.
Yeah, I didn't remember his name was Eric.
Yeah, Eric with a K, like my brother. Anyway,
Hi, Eric with a K.
His job in this one is to like go to the Irish and get them, like try to convince them to come on board. And it's all on the sea, right? And so what happens is they find a wet, bedraggled lass, and she's, eavesdropping or something. They're not quite sure. And so, of course, the Irish want to kill her. And he's like, well, we can't really do that. So he saves her by kidnapping her.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the way. It's the only way.
And she is...
He pulls her out of the water. Like,
yes.
Like she's...
Exactly.
Like she weighs nothing.
Of course. Like one-handed.
Because
he's the Hawk, right?
Exactly.
So her name is Ellie, and her father is a very powerful Irish laird. But he's loyal to the English king, the other, so boop, boop. Anyway, they
also
sail
important
around.
Note. I'm just gonna add one important note, which is he pulls her out of the sea, and she is convinced he is a Viking pirate. And so she's like, "Well, now I've been captured by Vikings."
I mean, I just have to go with it.
And he's like, "Fine, I'm not going to disabuse her of this idea." And then she tries to escape about 1 million times.
Which I appreciated. She was just like, I gotta keep going. But
that is part of the key. Like, the difference between light kidnapping and real kidnapping is the escape, the amount of escape work
attempts.
I mean,
right. If they kind of decide, hey, I'm into this for whatever reason, this suits my purposes, then it's light kidnapping. Agree.
Then it's light kidnapping.
That's what it is.
But Jen, I need to pause for a second.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Also, wait, in the Hawk, there is also like a very hot sex scene on a boat. If you like,
I was going to say, there's
like a storm buffeting them all over.
Sure.
And these two, she's like, oh, the storm. And he's like, let me hold you. And then he's like, let me do other things to you too. I'll distract you. And then they have sex on a boat in a storm.
It's amazing.
I mean, it's better than other things that happen on boats and storms. So, all right, but here's what I want to say, Jen, because we've started this and now we're just like talking about books that we really like where people get kidnapped. But we have not done what traditionally we do in Fated Mates, which is, why the fuck do we like this so much?
I just feel like it's self-explanatory, but I mean, I guess I like tried to come up with listen, 50 minutes in, I will admit something to everybody, right? Sometimes I have like my little lists, right? Like I attempted at the beginning. Is the kidnapping at the beginning or at the end? Is she into the kidnapping or not? Right? Like, yeah. Right? I think one of the things that it really hits on, my theory, I'll be interested in yours, is, and this is why I'm mad at myself for liking it. I would like to be clear to everybody. I think it really hits on sort of a like, oh, I'm so helpless, like kind of damsel in distress vibe. But I also think that it edges up onto like a kind of submissive thing. Like, right, like if this happens to me, if I'm kidnapped and I just have to be kidnapped, right, then I don't have to be, right? It's like a way of like releasing some agency.
Yeah. There's a primalness to kidnapping, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. And I think like we're seeing that, right? In dark romance, for example, like there's so much kidnapping in dark romance that it feels like, I mean, definitely it speaks to sort of a core, kind of core situation for women. But I also think that there is something to, I think for me, the part of the reason why in almost every single book on my list, possibly all the books on my list, the kidnapping happens and then the hero realizes that he has made a huge mistake. Right? And I think that there's something very interesting about, I think, again, romance is always, genre carries the myth, as Jane Ann Krentz likes to say. And so romance is always telling us a story about the world that we live in. And I think that these books are really like distilled patriarchy.
Yeah.
But the best part about them is that the like people doing the patriarchy have no idea just like how much this is going to fuck up everything for them.
Right.
And I think that like a kidnapping is often that, like, even if they get her over the line into Scotland, or they get her like onto the ship, or they get her, you know, or the plan is like, we're going to pull her out of the sea and then like dump her into the ocean when we're too far off, like offshore for like her to be able to name us. Like by the time they get to where the body is supposed to be dumped,
Yeah.
she has rewritten the DNA of the hero.
When this is done really well, you almost forget that like kidnapping is what did that. And my example of this is Burn for Me by Alona Andrews. So at the beginning of this book, unknowingly, Nevada and Connor are kind of like chasing the same bad guy.
Yeah.
For different reasons. They don't know. And he sees Nevada with this guy and thinks she knows something. Like, so he kidnaps her, right? Puts her in his evil basement and like essentially is like, he has a spell or I don't know what it's called, whatever. Yeah, I guess a spell. It's not what it's called. I can't believe I've read Hidden Legacy a million times. It's not called a spell, whatever. And he is going to use it to like extract information from her. Right. And like no one can resist this. Like once you're inside of this like circle, it essentially is going to like work on you to like have you expel it. But she has like a very firmly held belief that she has another family, which is like you never give up the secrets of your clients. And so what she does to break the spell, and it's so smart, is she gives him one of her own secrets, like her most deeply held secret about her life. And he is like, who the hell are you? And what kind of magic do you have that you were able to resist me? And then she like clamps him with her magic. She essentially, it teaches her something she didn't know about herself. And then he is just basically like, well, now I'm obsessed with you. And I was like, Connor Rogan, that is how it should be.
Exactly. Yes.
A plus. Dragonbound, same.
Dragonbound. I also have Dragonbound on my book. I also have, do you have A Promise of Fire on your book? Amanda Boucher's A Promise of Fire.
I've never read that, believe it or not.
I think you would really like it. The series is done. Like, it's an Alona style series, except I think there is sex in the first one. I'm still shocked and appalled by that.
I know. I'm so sorry, everybody. It's true.
Okay, but that whole thing is, so the setup of A Promise of Fire is similar. I mean, it's not similar to Dragonbound, where he hunts her down and then like kidnaps her.
Come live with me in my penthouse. You stole my penny. A plus.
That book is perfect. But the premise of A Promise of Fire is Kat, the heroine, is like, she plays at being like a fortune teller in a traveling circus to avoid being seen or like found, because she has this like, she's called the Kingmaker. Like she's known, that is the power that she has. She is able to, if you lie, like you personally lying to her hurts her. So she like can tell when you're lying. And so she spends like basically all of her time hiding, because if she is captured, right, she can be used. She's a very powerful weapon. Like if somebody has her with them and she's just like in the room and another person lies at them, like say, there's like a political machination afoot or whatever. If they lie, she's in pain. And so you can tell, right? And so there's I don't know, there's like a lot, it's very fantasy. There's like a part of the country, the part of the world that's like magic deprived and a part that has magic. And she gets kidnapped by the hero Griffin, who is a warlord who basically like intends to use her for this purpose. And then the moment he sees what lying does to her, he like is wrecked by it.
I like it.
And then it's like, it's really it's fabulous. It's very, very, it's a great book. Similar thing. Again, kidnap, for me, that's the key to it. Like if he doesn't suffer kind of immediately.
Yeah.
or like immediately discover that he has really like fucked up royally by tapping this person, it's not for me.
So here's what I want to say now. Remember, you're talking about old school, right? Old school kidnapping.
Yeah.
If you would like to enjoy a new school romance kidnapping, Kindle Unlimited is for you, right? That is where you are going to get the good stuff.
Are you going to talk about Kidnapped by the Bank Robbers?
Hell yes, I am. That's on
good.
there.
I forget what it's called. What's it called?
Kidnapped by Kinky Bank Robbers, Sarah.
By Kinky Bank Robbers, the most important word I left out.
Yeah, that's on my list. I feel like you can make a strong case for Ice Planet Barbarians. Now, one of the things that you get into, I think there is a subset of Kidnapped where, like, she is saved from a kidnapping by the hero that still kind of, like, triggers a little bit of this for me because often he is like complicit or knowledgeable in some way or doesn't get there in time or whatever. So I have a couple of those on there. I felt like kidnapping was like a big enough of a part of it. But I do want to say that, like, if you're like, oh yeah, I fear nothing. Kindle Unlimited is Kidnapping Unlimited.
I fear nothing.
Right? Kidnapping Unlimited is where we are right now. Okay, so you want me to start with the Kinky Bank Robbers?
I do.
Okay, so this is a series by, I feel like it got rebranded with something less hilarious. Taken Hostage by Kinky Bank Robbers by Annika Martin. This is a series where it's like, honestly, so pure, so perfect. The first book is called The Hostage.
Pure.
Oh, yeah. It has in fact been rebranded to just The Bank Robbers, which I think is a mistake, but what do I know? The first book is called The Hostage Bargain. And in this book, a beautiful young thing is working at her job at the bank when in come the bank robbers. Melinda is her name. The bank robbers call each other by like the names of gods. So there's Zeus, Odin, and Thor. And she essentially offers herself up to be part of their bank robbing gang.
Oh, what do they name her?
Isis.
Obviously. There's a lot of confusion about the mythology here.
They call themselves the God Pack, which is funny. And so she essentially, Odin's like, I'm not sure. Zeus doesn't want anything to do with her, but by the end, he does have something to do with her in the most ridiculous place ever. It's like literally like they're sweltering to death inside of a locked storage container. Like the kind that goes on like the back of a truck. But anyway, it is like just super wacky. Like it's wacky hijinks with bank robbers and kinkiness. And these four have a great time together.
And you love it. I know.
I loved it. So there's 4 of these books. Sadly, they have been rebranded as just The Bank Robbers. I guess there's 6 now. Look, it looks like I have some reading to look forward to. I don't think I'm all caught up.
Oh, you don't? Better download them right now.
Better. This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by K.L. Parsons, author of Love by a Landslide.
K.L. Parsons' debut romance, Love by a Landslide, Jen, it sounds so cute. Lucy O'Malley, our heroine, is done being a doormat. I'm right there. I
love it. I'm in.
She's been dumped by her dumb boyfriend. She's been booted from her apartment, and this has all happened on her 30th birthday, and she will not stand for it. So she is going to take on this Bavarian-themed romantic getaway that she and her boyfriend had planned. She will head out to the middle of nowhere, Washington, for a little beer, a little bratwurst, I don't think that's a euphemism, and a little backpacking. And she does not care that this was originally planned for a couple. Unfortunately, her guide, a very straight, narrow Jonathan Miller, who is extraordinarily risk-averse and runs the outdoor guiding company that's supposed to take her on this 2-person romantic getaway, does think that this is a problem. He had carefully laid plans. They did not include a sexy little brunette like Lucy. And listen, here's the truth. He's just like, let's get in and let's get out. It's probably going to be a disaster, but it's only 3 days. Except, Jen, a freak landslide decimates the only trail back. And Jonathan and Lucy are stuck with their sizzling chemistry in an only one hammock, only one tent, possibly only one sleeping bag, Jen. This could be for you.
It could be for me, for sure.
And what are two people supposed to do out there alone in the woods?
I couldn't even dream of an idea.
Lucy's going to choose the man, I'm guessing.
A+, Sarah. Love by a Landslide is a slow burn adventure rom-com with a grumpy sunshine trope, forced proximity, and main characters in their 30s. It is the first in the Stranded in Leavenworth season, and the second book, Love Under Snowfall, is also available right now. You can get Love by a Landslide in print, ebook, or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. If you click on the chapter title right now, you can be taken to buy the book. Thanks to KL Parsons for sponsoring this week's episode.
I want to name check Mila Finelli for 2 kidnappings. Again, one Kleypas style at the end. In Mafia Mistress, when she is kidnapped by a bad guy, and the hero loses his whole mind and realizes that he simply cannot just like keep her as his sex toy in his fancy house. He must marry her.
Yes.
Because that is the only way that she'll be safe, is if he is protecting her at all costs. And then she takes that bad guy and she twists him into a hero in Mafia Hero, with large air quotes, in Mafia Madman, where he wants to exact revenge on the hero from the first book. And so he kidnaps the heroine from the first book's sister and keeps her in a cage on his boat.
Yes.
So not dark. Yes, Mafia. And kidnapping. But she takes off all her clothes and then seduces him from inside the cage, and then he can't. I mean, it's very quick.
Obviously.
Perfect example of he kidnaps her thinking, I've got the upper hand, and then she gets naked and he no longer has the upper hand, and then she just stays kidnapped on her own whim.
I mean, they are on a yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean. Fine.
But still.
Okay. I have I guess I would say the closest I get to an actual real kidnapping.
Yeah.
Is Twisted Pride by Cora Riley. This is part of the Kimura Chronicles books. This is a mafia series. In this one, listen, I'm going to tell you, you only need to know one thing. His name is Remo Falcone. He wants revenge. And the way he's going to do that, of course. Standard fare is to steal Serafina, to kidnap her. When, Sarah? On her wedding day, where from the altar in her wedding dress.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that seems like the most logical time. Very difficult for anyone to witness or follow you if you steal a bride in her wedding dress from the altar.
I mean,
no. I mean, I see no problem with that.
And, and here's the thing, though, because this is mafia, right? He can't, once she's been stolen by him in front of everybody in her wedding dress, she can't ever go back, right? So she has to essentially, figure out a way.
Because mafias are just medievals.
Yeah, exactly, right? She's basically look, I have my pride. I'm not going to go crawling back to my family. They're not going to take me back anyway. This has ruined my life, so my only chance is to essentially, break this man. And turn him into my man.
Terrific.
And honestly,
I love it. No notes.
I loved it. Twisted Pride by Cora Riley.
I like it. Okay, what about Charlotte Stein's Taken? Have you read that one?
On my list, but you talk about it.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since I've read it. So I was like, oh, yeah.
So this is a classic. Listen, Charlotte Stein now is writing rom-coms, and bless, I'm so happy for her. I want her to have all good things. But this is a classic old school Charlotte Stein book where it really is just 2 people in a phone booth.
Right.
Only it's 2 people in the back room of a bookstore.
Sure.
So the premise here is that the heroine, who's like, I mean, it's Charlotte, so she's probably in college, let's be honest. She and a friend, like the friend has some sort of like vendetta against this man who owns the used bookstore, like a, not a used bookstore, like collectible books. Why can't I think of the name?
Rare Books, Sarah?
Thank you, Rare Books.
Allow me to help you.
Listen, it's hard. I had a COVID shot today. Everybody go get your COVID shots. It's important. So he owns a rare bookstore. And so, I don't know, her friend has a vendetta. I don't know why. And long story short, she and this friend end up inside this bookstore and they set a fire, which I don't remember. I don't remember why.
Something, sure.
But they set a fire. And he's pissed because he's like, these are fucking rare books. These are expensive, rare books. And so he stops, he catches them. The friend is in the wind. She takes off. And Rosie, the heroine, is like stuck there. And so he grabs her and he pulls her into the back room of this bookshop. And he says, like, I'm going to just keep you here until the police come, which seems reasonable. And then he's like, I'm going to teach you a lesson.
Yes.
Which seems like it might be getting kinky. And then he and this girl like basically like peel themselves open in a classic Charlotte Stein kind of way.
Yeah.
And then like what the whole book takes place over this like very short amount of time where they are in this room together, trapped in a phone booth, right?
Yes.
It's so fun. She can't leave because he's basically like, I've called the police.
Well, and doesn't he like chain her up back there?
Yeah, to like a radiator. But like lightly.
Restraints are for amateurs.
Oh boy. Listen.
Amazing.
Charlotte Stein's taken. You can't go wrong with Charlotte Stein.
No, you really can't.
You can't.
Okay. I would like to mention the Queens and Monster series by J.T. Gessinger. I believe it is, honestly, I think there's a little like kidnapping on all of them. I think it's just the third one, which is Savage Hearts. Mm-hmm. He kidnaps her, but he takes the wrong one, I believe. Right? So, and then she's like, it's no problem. I'm just going to make your life miserable. And he's like, damn it, I'm in love with you. But I'm pretty sure, if I'm being honest, I think there's like a little kidnapping or like duplicitous. And like, you know, he's like, oh, you're coming with me. And she's like, okay. And then he's like, oops, kidnapped. So I believe that almost kidnapped. I really think that any of these would probably like push this button. But it's Savage Hearts is the one where he has her, he takes the wrong. He's like trying to kidnap like somebody else and gets the wrong girl instead, which I thought was a nice little twist.
Right.
Gets Sloane instead.
All right. Well, now I'm off. Now I'm going off book
here
because my list is done, but I do have one more. In Sophie Jordan's Hell Breaks Loose, the president's daughter gets kidnapped by like a white supremacist organization, I think. And like whisked away into this like lair where the hero has been embedded for years, like as an FBI agent or undercover. And then he's there and she has been kidnapped into this place. She slips the Secret Service and like, you know, I mean, it's romance reasonsy. And then he's like, oh shit, she's gonna like, I have to save her. Like, she's the president's daughter.
Right. I have to break cover and save her. Yeah.
And so, but before he does, there's like this whole thing where he like claims, this is a real Sophie Jordan thing. He claims her as his, like with all the like dirt bags around. And he's like, she's mine. No one touches her. And then he like pulls her into a room. And I can't remember if they like fully fuck, but they sure do other things. And then like when he does rescue her, he like blows cover, he rescues her.
Yeah.
They get out and then like they separate and like it's very heartbreaking because they've been through this like deeply traumatic experience together.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, ma'am, this is my job now. I can't, whatever.
Sure.
And it's very fun.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to name check a couple.
Yeah.
That are kind of series where I think like there's elements of all the things we're talking about. And then there's like two more I actually just want to actually like fully discuss. So, but here, I want to name drop the Horde Kings of Dakar series by Zoe Draven. The first one is called Captive of the Horde King. It is a bop. Like you just like pick it up and start reading and there you go. Now you're down the rabbit hole. And basically what happens is the heroine, essentially to save her brother's life, like kind of offers herself up to the king as like a prize. And then he's like, great, I love this and I'm going to keep you. So all those books in that series, it's like Captive of the Horde King and Claimed by the Horde King. And listen, Taken by the Horde King is book number 5.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. Okay. The Grabbed series by Lolita Lopez, I really like. These are kind of, I would say, more kidnapping adjacent, which is the way the premise is like there's these human women and they get put into like, I think I probably talked about this series like a couple of years ago on like the space, like an Aliens episode. Aliens love to do kidnapping. And in this, it's their job practically. In this series, the women who essentially for various reasons, you could be a criminal, you could be like whatever, go into this like Hunger Games style thing where they all get like run. And if you get grabbed, if you get caught, then you have to go like marry this alien and let him pleasure you.
And let him pleasure you.
Obviously. So that's the Grabbed series, which again, I read the first couple. It's up to 7. Who knew?
All right.
So I'm excited to revisit these. Okay. So those are, I wanted to talk about. And then I think in Ice Planet Barbarians, now obviously they are kidnapped by bad aliens, but in some of the books, in Barbarian Mine is the one I'm thinking of. Essentially, all of the first group of aliens have essentially like found their mates. And in this one, what happens instead is Harlow is kidnapped. Like one of the like aliens essentially kidnaps her because he's convinced that like we'll resonate to each other if she's stuck with me. And instead, one of the other guys is like, you will not take Harlow. So, and then the guy who was the kidnapper gets his HEA later on with somebody else. Mm-hmm. So there's like, listen, this is like a multi-layer kidnapping cake, Ice Planet Barbarians. It's like layers upon layers of kidnapping happening. Okay. All right, now.
Well, because there are good kidnappers and bad kidnappers.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So
heavy kidnappers and light kidnappers, if you will.
I am delighted by that. Yes. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. Here's where it gets good. Sarah, I have 2 left. I don't know where they fit into this whole.
Okay.
But like, okay, one is more of the like, I've been kidnapped by, and then a guy saves me. This book, though, is called Chieftain, the Outlander Book Club, ... in space, ! This book has ellipses and a sexclamation point in its title. The author is Annie Lucas. Sarah,
Wait, I gotta Google it. Hang on here. This is the only time Eric will leave typing in
Chieftain, : the Outlander Book Club, ellipses, in space, !
Holy cannoli. All right.
You are not ready for this plot. Okay, so.
I am not ready for this plot. Guaranteed.
You are not. You absolutely are not. Okay. The main character.
For the record, everyone, I just added it to my Kindle Unlimited.
Yes. The main character's name is Emmy. Now, here's the deal. She and her friends are out like camping. They're all like in their 50s and 60s. And they're kidnapped by aliens. Bad aliens. We're going to be able to do this. They're doing some heavy kidnapping. Okay, and we're going to sell these women into slavery.
For 6-year-old American ladies?
Wait.
Tell me they reverse age them.
Yes!
Romance is unmatched, everybody.
They reverse age them.
Oh my God. How much do I wish we were doing Fate Mates Live so we could just be like, bring this?
Bring it on. Yeah. I was delighted the way I found this. Listen, I'm going to heads up to Robin in the Discord.
Yes.
Because I searched the Discord for the word kidnap and came up with this. And I was like, Robin, you were doing the Lord's work.
So they reverse age.
They reverse age them to like the time of their, like, it's like a magic tube they go through and they come out at their, like, the prime of their life. Like
whatever that is.
Whatever that was. But here's the deal. Then she's saved. She's saved by the chieftain of the Vactaire.
See him. He's got 42 abs.
And he says to her, I'm awfully sad to report to you that this has changed you at a molecular level. You have been moved back. You have all the wisdom of your life, but you now have the body of your Megan 25-year-old self. And it is against the law to return you to Earth. So,
sure,
you have to stay with me.
Because this is better than any pill, any shot, anything.
That is the setup of this book.
So what is a girl to do but be banged into space by this chieftain?
Yeah.
Oh my God. By the way, everybody, I just have to tell you, I did just put this on my Kindle and I do intend to read it. What I would like to say is that one of the lines in the description is, and staying by Kaon's side, that's something my reawakened hormones greatly appreciate.
Oh, yeah. She's like, what is this feeling? She's like, I haven't felt this way in years. Just looking at him.
I mean, Jennifer, you have really done the job.
I know. I do have one more.
Okay, let's do it.
It's called My Favorite Kidnapper by Melanie Moreland.
Classic title.
But it's like a rom-com. She is a chef. She's actually a baker. And he is literally from Italy. His name's Dante. He is going to his romance reasons, even though he's 38, his goddaughter is getting married. And the bride's best friend baked this amazing, it's like cupcakes and cakes, and the tree is a cake, everything's a cake. And Dante has a real sweet tooth. So he's eating this. He's like, this is the most delicious thing I've ever heard. And he meets the baker and she's like, get away from my cupcakes. And of course, no one ever talks to him this way. But it's totally all of those tropes, but basically played for sweet giggles. It's so cute. So anyway, he's like, I'm just delighted by you. Whatever can we do? He finds out who she is, finds out, her boss is taking advantage of her. So he pays off all of her debts, kidnaps her to Italy, and says to her, I would like you to bake me a cake every day for the next 60 days, divided by your debt. It's essentially that's how you're going to pay me
Whatever
off.
It is, you're going to bake for me for 60 days, and that's going to...
Yes.
And I'll wipe your debt clear.
Yeah. And she's like, I'm not going to sleep with you. And he's like, well, sure, you're going to do that too, because I am delighted by you, and I think you're an amazing human. And let me icing off of you. It is so cute.
Perfect.
It is adorable. It's and she's just so outraged by her. He calls her Little Bee because she's just buzzing around. How dare you eat my cupcakes? And he's just like, I'll eat another one and I'll kiss you while I'm at it. It is so cute.
Adorable. Wait, what's it called?
It's called My Favorite Kidnapper.
Yes.
It is literally the lightest. If you want a literal light kidnapping, there it is.
Amazing.
But yeah, I've got to tell you, Chieftain, the Outlander Book Club in Space.
I mean, it doesn't get better than that is what I'm saying here. I think that everyone should just read all these books in reverse order.
I know. Start at the beginning.
This is a delight. So I hope everybody forgives us for making light of kidnapping this whole time. Don't kidnap anybody. Just do as these books say, not as they do. No, I don't think that's right. I don't know. You know what I'm saying. As your mother, as your resident mother.
Depiction is not endorsement.
Exactly. Don't kidnap anyone. Don't get kidnapped. But if you do get kidnapped, make sure it's by an alien chieftain who will reverse your age.
Yes, obviously.
But I assume you can also get pregnant out there in space, so please, be safe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when they reversed engineered them, all that stuff.
Everything came back, so be careful. Because then you got a baby with 42 abs.
Yeah, you could have an alien baby. That's what made it possible.
All right.
I don't make the rules. I don't make the magic tubes.
That is science.
Romance Science Part 2.
All right, everyone, please join us this weekend for a phone bank. We are getting close to the election. You can find all that information at fatedmates.net/fatedstates. And we are still raising money for down ticket races in Pennsylvania. It feels close, but every dollar you can share right now will go directly to people on the ground to make sure we protect the Pennsylvania state legislature. You can find that information at fatedmates.net/giving circle, along with all of the information in all of this episode at fatedmates.net under show notes, which Jen works diligently on every week. An absolute star. I am Sarah McLean. I am here with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. You can find us every week, every Wednesday in whatever podcasting app you prefer. You can also find us online at Fated Mates or Fated Mates Pod everywhere. We are also, what are we doing? Oh, we also have a Patreon. If you really love these kind of bantery things and the chaos that we bring to your earlobes every Wednesday, please join our Patreon. You can find more information on that at fatedmates.net/Patreon. The Patreon gets you access to our private Discord where more than 1,000 absolutely fantastic romance lovers hang out and talk about books all day, every day. I think that's it.
I do think that's it.
Let us know what your favorite kidnapping romances are. Stay safe out there.
Grave Temptation. Victorian Rogues, Book 1. Written by June Westwood. Narrated by Timothy Campbell. Chapter 1. London, 1873. Under the cloak of darkness was the best time to bury a body, and if there was one thing Thomas Castle knew, it was how to properly dispose of the dead. As he plunged his shovel into muddy earth, moonlight and the corpse wrapped in burlap at his feet were the only witnesses to his grim undertaking. He had precisely 30 minutes until the Highgate Cemetery watchman made his rounds. Ample time to finish digging the shallow grave, deposit his ward, and slip back into the labyrinthine streets beyond Swain's Lane. Thomas wiped away a drop of rain that ran down the side of his face, inhaling the scent of damp moss and unfurling ostrich ferns. With London in the full bloom of spring, the disguise of night would ebb away as days grew longer, giving him less time to work. Rows of tombstones cast long, ghoulish shadows on freshly turned soil as he dumped another shovelful of dirt on top of the growing heap. Abruptly, he heard a noise, not the typical rustling of nocturnal rodents or the call of a night owl. It sounded like breathing. Laboured breathing that was coming from... Dear Lord, it was coming from inside the burlap sack. Kneeling, Thomas reached out, willing away the tremor in his gloved hand. With one fist clenched on the sack and the other tightening around the handle of his dagger, he wrenched the fabric away and thrust the weapon down fiercely. Just before the sharp tip pierced through a grey shirt sleeve, the corpse rolled to one side and coughed, narrowly missing the blade as his dagger found purchase in the soggy ground. Thomas yanked the steel back and lunged at the corpse, or rather the flesh-and-blood person who had sprung unceremoniously back to life. He leaped on the figure and used his forearm to press against an unexpectedly delicate collarbone, holding the knife in an underhand grip aimed straight for the jugular vein. He found himself inches away from rounded emerald eyes, glassy and unfocused. They held the familiar air of someone drugged with laudanum. Thomas let the primal adrenaline in his body dissipate and lowered his knife to the ground so as not to frighten the woman further. "Who are you, miss?" he demanded, removing his body weight so she could breathe. "And how is it that you switched places with a dead man?" Her pale face contorted with horror. "A dead man?" Raindrops gathered in the fine strands of her auburn hair, wetting the shoulders of her high-necked dress. If you knew who that cretin was, you'd be glad he was slain. Thomas grimaced, peeling off his thick leather gloves. Few knew the depths of depravity men like Percival Crawley, the cretin in question, were capable of. How they took young boys, cut them down with 1,000 barbaric slashes, and remoulded them into the deadliest fighters in East London. As long as Thomas had a dagger in his pocket and a shovel to pierce the ground, he would pick off the East End syndicate leaders one methodically dug hole at a time. Now a solitary wrinkle threatened to unravel his well-formed plans. A missing body turning up where he didn't expect it. Or worse, not turning up at all. He couldn't decide which possibility was less preferable. The woman inched away, her face growing more ghostly by the second. "Who put you up to this? And where have you taken me?" "I haven't knowingly taken you anywhere. Now I'll have your name, there's not much time," he commanded in a tone that had toppled the resolve of many a syndicate captain. If the watchman discovered him in the act, the entire operation would be ruined. Highgate Cemetery was host to many nooks and foliage-devoured crannies. Should detectives thoroughly inspect the remote moss-covered recesses of the surrounding area, they would discover traces of loose soil over gravesites that should have long been at rest. Thomas couldn't have that. Not if he wanted to stop the East End Syndicate's reign of terror for good. Shivers racked her body, and her voice was groggy and slow. "Why should I tell you anything? You must be a killer." "Only when a person needs killing." Her eyes grew larger and her tone dwindled to a strained whisper. "What are you? Some kind of vigilante? Some kind of monster?" Many would agree with both descriptions. Leaning on her hands, she dragged herself back another inch. If she wasn't careful, she'd tumble right into the pit he'd dug nearly 4 feet deep, were he to hazard a guess. She squinted over his shoulder at the chapel building. Carved stonework, narrow windows, and stately finials quietly lorded over the darkness. Her gaze shifted to the north. Monumental pillars led to the Egyptian Avenue passageway, flanked by tombs sealed with York stone doors. "Hell is much colder than I expected," she said, her fingers clenching a clump of wet grass to steady herself. "But you can't be the devil. You lack the required horns." She gave him a bleary once-over and added, "And hooves." Her parched ramblings trailed off as her eyes landed on his exposed wrist. Thomas must have pushed his sleeve up while taking off his gloves, revealing one of the many white crescent-shaped scars that scored his body. He quickly yanked his cuff down, hiding the old wound. She hauled herself back, blinking as if trying to focus her blurred vision. Thomas shoved his gloves into his pocket. "Stay still, otherwise I'll have to pick you up and carry you." If she moved much more, she would tumble backward into the grave. He wouldn't allow her to get hurt, especially since he'd unwittingly delivered her here like a sack of ill-fated turnips. Just then a black spider scurried across her fingers. At the arachnid's 8 spindly legs skittering across her flesh, the woman shrieked and jerked back. Without hesitation, he grabbed hold of her thigh with one large hand. They both froze. A flush fanned Thomas's neck. "Don't move another inch." He had meant for the words to be a stern warning, but instead they sounded like a husky rumble. His gloves must have prevented him noticing her warmth when he'd carried her into the cemetery, for even now her slight form conducted heat into his hand and up his forearm. When Thomas had embarked on his task that evening, he knew the body would be a fresh kill. But not this fresh. She stared at the spot where they made contact, then back at him, her eyelids fluttering rapidly. The woman opened her mouth, and Thomas braced for her scream. But instead of letting forth a cry that would rattle Highgate Cemetery's skeletons in their coffins, her eyes rolled back and she slumped to the ground in a cold faint. If he were not so accustomed to people being terrified of him, he might have taken offense. The light of a lantern swinging in the distance stole his attention. Damn, the watchman had arrived early. If he didn't move now, Thomas would be caught. He lifted the green-eyed siren into his arms. Lightly placing his hand over her mouth, he leaned closer. His lips brushed her earlobe, which sent a current of awareness down his spine. "Don't make a sound. Dead or alive, you're coming with me." Chapter 2. The space between consciousness and sleep blended in Abigail's murky dreams. Or had they been nightmares? Her brother must have sent the devil himself to fetch her after her desperate escape attempt. Abigail's eyes remained shut, and her back rested against soft cushions with the crackle of a fire emanating from somewhere in the room. A sharp voice cut through the atmosphere and caused her muscles to tighten with dread. "Bungling the Berry isn't like you, Castle, or the bodies you've disposed of, and now you seem to have met your downfall. Her." Abigail's breath stalled, her head pounding. This man the stranger spoke of, Castle, could have hurt her, but his violent response halted the instant he saw her face. Did he know he had the sister of an earl within his grasp? Castle had whispered something to her, but she could not remember what he said. She wiggled numb toes inside her leather boots, saying a silent prayer of thanks that some feeling had returned to her extremities. If anyone discovered who she was and what she ran from, ruination would promptly follow like the swift slice of a guillotine, destroying Abigail's chance of having the future she craved. One where she was free to make her own decisions, far away from her betrothed and her dishonourable brother, the Earl of Hargrave. Her throat cleared impatiently, and its owner's rich timbre stole the air from her lungs. Percival Crawley's body vanished, but mark me, those East End bastards will pay the price. Frost, we'll utilise your intelligence connections at Scotland Yard. McGrath, I'll need your help finding Crawley's body. These trafficking weasels won't get away with whatever games they're playing this time. The voice belonged to the man who had almost killed her. She was sure of it. He didn't know she'd awoken, but now she possessed critical information. His name and the names of 2 other men. Abigail squinted through lids that protested with drowsy grit. Crystal blue eyes met hers with a force so visceral that Abigail would have stumbled backward were she not already sitting down. The memory of his face was an insufficient echo of reality, for the glow of flickering golden light brought Castle's striking features into focus. His hair was black as midnight, and barely tamed. The shadow of a beard dusted a square jaw with a full mouth. Honeyed skin gleamed with bronze lustre, and a straight nose flared with disdain. The man's height was giant, even in this foreign room that boasted palatial ceilings and a cavernous interior. He was leaning against a large oak desk, but stood straight when he saw she was awake. The lengthening of his spine caused him to grow impossibly taller, and his savage stare roved over her with the shrewd interest of a man accustomed to taking control. "Decided to return to the land of the living?" Castle's voice was every bit a smoky growl, leashed power rolling off him in waves. She forced her eyes away to avoid his direct gaze and take in her surroundings. Burgundy velvet drapes spilled from tall windows like recklessly spent blood, their texture complementing pristinely polished wood panels gleaming in the low candelabra light. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with ancient tomes towered up every available wall, a sight that she usually would have revelled in, was she not so concerned with the over 6 foot, 200-pound danger in front of her. 3 men regarded her from their respective vantage points in the library. One stood next to a marble fireplace that popped and sizzled with orange flames. His dark blonde hair was neatly combed back from chiselled features, which were marred by a nose that was bent and slightly off-centre, as though it had been broken several times before. With an elbow resting on the mantel, the other on his hip, his relaxed posture concealed a bound strength beneath his dove-grey waistcoat and crisply knotted white cravat. Another of the unyielding devils watched her from an overstuffed leather chair positioned near a rosewood pianoforte, gazing at her with an eerie calm. A brutal scar interrupted his right eyebrow and sliced the skin over his cheekbone. The man assessed her with a discerning look, making her feel even more vulnerable than she already was. Their gazes pierced her like keen arrows. Contemplative, calculating, a nerving stillness harkened the hunger of a pack of wolves who smelled blood on the wind. "Where am I?" she managed through chattering teeth. Her abductor stalked forward, frosty sapphire eyes dilated as they continued to observe her. Abigail was propped up in the corner of a maroon sofa, but at his sudden advance drew her knees up and tucked them to her chest, forming a protective ball. She thrust a hand out in a staying plea. "Don't come any closer." Castle slowly raised both hands to chest level, palms open. "Had I intended to hurt you, I could have done so already. Easily." He was right, of course. If he had ill intentions, the man could have done anything he pleased while she was unconscious. Castle leaned forward and Abigail stiffened. Instead of placing his enormous hand around her neck and snapping it like a dry twig, He reached past her, pulled a garnet cashmere lap robe from the back of the couch, and arranged it about her shoulders. The blanket's warmth enveloped her, thawing some of the goosebumps from her arms. She pulled it closer to her body, greedily absorbing its warmth. Then Castle reached into his pants pocket, produced an ivory-handled dagger, and removed the leather sheath. With a yelp, Abigail jolted back, turning her head and shielding her face. This was it. He would slit her throat within milliseconds, and her vision would forever go black. Would she finally see her mother again in heaven? 10 years had been a long time to face this world alone, an eternity without Sarah Richmond's warm smile. Something made a muffled thud next to her on the sofa. She cracked one eyelid open, then the other, and the milky handle of the small weapon shone back at her. Castle straightened. There, now you are armed, and I am not. Abigail peered down at the length of steel, then looked at each of the Leviathan's faces. The odds of coming out victorious against 3 mountainous men, even armed with a blade, were nil. As bizarre as it was, she decided it would be wise to accept the offering. The last thing she wanted to do was offend Castle and chance raising his ire. He was a dangerous man, after all. Abigail dipped her chin in a hesitant nod. Thank you, Mr. Castle. One of his black brows rose and he exchanged looks with Frost and McGrath. I couldn't help but overhear you a moment ago, Abigail said, running her fingers over the knife's handle in a nervous flutter, not quite bringing herself to pick it up. The thought of holding such a thing, let alone piercing someone's skin with it, even in self-defense, made her queasy. Castle's expression was smooth. The only deviation was a slight tensing of his jaw. Right there. So it was possible to drive a wedge beneath his armor of ice. Curious. Perhaps Abigail could use the information to her advantage. It was a strange notion, engaging in mental chess against such a seemingly impervious opponent. But could she deliver a checkmate before he knew what she was about? Or before he touched her again? Castle's attention fixed on her. Seeing as how you know my name, I'll get to the crux of the matter. Does the East End Syndicate mean anything to you? Perhaps you or your family owe them a debt and cannot pay? Tension in the room kicked up as the 3 awaited her answer. She regarded each of the men, her nerves a brittle sphere of glass. Was this some sort of test? Abigail gathered the blanket firmly about her shoulders as though it could protect her from the consequences of giving the wrong answer. I've heard of the organisation, as most people in London have. A ruthless lot who plague the streets with pickpockets and prostitution. I have no affiliation with them and never have. Nor anyone close to you? Nor anyone... Her mind snagged on a picture of her brother, too full of greed and hubris to think twice about making a duplicitous deal. Nor anyone close to me, she finished with a shaky breath. Upon their father's death, Eldon had inherited not only the title of Earl of Hargrave, but their sire's penchant for gambling and whoring as well. The last of the Hargrave fortunes squeezed to ash in the fist of a feckless drunk. The wealth that her loathsome betrothed, Clarence Montague, would provide had drowned out Abigail's protestations. The promise of refilling the Earl of Hargrave's coffers proved too enticing an offer for the impoverished nobleman to pass up. Nobleman? Abigail clenched her teeth. The title was one that her older brother was wholly unworthy of, for he was not noble at all. He was spineless, a spoiled brat, gifted with the weapon of aristocratic influence and her life with which to barter. No matter what she did, she could not let these 3 men know the depths of her misery. Nothing good came when a man sensed a woman's weakness. Abigail regarded the 3 giants as if they didn't have the ability to crush her between a thumb and forefinger. The last thing I recall was walking home alone on Palmer Street in Westminster. Someone jumped out from the shadows of an alley and grabbed me. The man pushed me against a wall and forced some foul-tasting liquid down my throat. I came to in the graveyard, but don't remember much after. Her cheeks heated, and she glanced at the thigh Castle had scorched with his hand. Abigail had not been walking to her home, but heading away from it in the dead of night. The small reticule holding £10 for her journey was long gone, presumably stolen by the wretch who also stole her opportunity for escape. Imperative details that Castle need not know. She chewed her bottom lip. What if one of the men in this library had drugged her? But whoever pushed her against a brick wall and pried her mouth open wouldn't have been equal to the size of these 3 men. Her attacker had not felt mammoth. He'd been slight, yet strong against her back. Castle gestured to his compatriots. "Since you already know who I am, allow me to introduce you to our company. Connor McGrath," he nodded toward the man with the scar, "and Damien Frost." He lifted his chin to the distinguished tawny-haired man by the fireplace. "My business associates." Frost scoffed, pieces of golden light shining in his closely cropped beard. His mouth curved into what would be considered a smile on a less imposing man, but it only resembled the bearing of pointed white canines on him. "Business associates, indeed. Don't let him fool you. We are the only two he calls friends." Flicking an irritated glance at Frost, Castle continued. "Just when our long-suffering mission is gaining momentum, Crawley's body went missing. Yours in his place. What say you to that, miss?"
Pritchard. Abigail Pritchard. I would say it's a pleasure, but—"
She swept the room with unsteady vision.
"That would certainly prove me a lie, wouldn't it? I must admit that I don't know what to make of all this."
Now she could identify each of them by sight and name. But a question lingered in the back of her mind. Why would Castle provide their names so readily? Surely the police would find this information valuable. "The criminal was a small man," Frost said. "A similar height to yourself. That is likely why Castle did not detect anything was amiss until it was too late."
Abigail's stomach roiled. Her body had touched the spot where a dead man once lay. The thought should have made her want to get up and run. Whether it was the after-effects of the drug or the idea of going back home to an existence more bleak and hopeless than she could stand, Abigail remained seated. In all her 24 years, she never thought she would end up the foil for some criminal enterprise mix-up. And just as she was on her way to taste freedom for the first time in her life.
"Crawley was a heartless butcher and deserved every bit of what he got," Castle said in a cold clip. "His nickname was the Thimble because he was as small as a fingertip."
They spoke of dead bodies and missing outlaws as casually as discussing the weather. Abigail's chest squeezed at the thought of her life ending in a lonely grave. The question was, how had she been switched with Crawley and why? Part of her was too frightened to know the answer.
"Can you think of anyone who bears ill will toward you?"
Connor McGrath's deep monotone held the faint whisper of a Scottish brogue bending his vowels.
"Enough ill will to see you buried alive?"
"Of course not." Abigail's hand covered her heart, a sharp pain needling her chest. Did she?
McGrath turned to Castle. "You sure Crawley was dead?"
"Very sure."
Castle narrowed his eyes at McGrath.
Frost pushed off the mantle and took several paces to the sofa.
"Now that we find ourselves with a maid who knows too much, what shall we do with her?"
"Maid? Who are they?" "Oh, yes." Abigail glanced down at the pilfered grey cotton uniform she had donned before making her escape. Her white cap must have gotten lost in that dreadful cemetery. Pressing stiff lips together, she regarded each of the men's wolfish faces. She couldn't go back, not now. Eldon would punish her for trying to run away. Perhaps this time he would make good on threats to hobble her so she could not escape. If Abigail was marked by the East End Syndicate, her hastily crafted plans of fleeing to Cardiff or Swansea in Wales to find work as a shopgirl were ruined before they'd begun. On the other hand, could she risk throwing herself at the mercy of Castle and these murderous men? Castle could have callously thrown her into the grave and not looked back, but instead he had taken her with him and she remained unharmed. If she returned to her brother's keeping, Abigail would become the victim of a violent, vengeful storm. The scenario would end in marriage to a cruel, common-born man who only wished to use her to gain proximity to the aristocracy. The thought made her nauseous. Anything would be better than that.
"Send her home."
Castle's voice sliced like a knife through her troubled thoughts.
"But I warn you, Miss Pritchard, have a care. Be wary of dark shadows on your trail. Maybe you were the most convenient body to throw in a sack, or you've made a very dangerous enemy."
He nodded to McGrath.
"You may escort her. Take my carriage."
McGrath stood, broad shoulders testing the seams of a coal shirt, bruised knuckles swinging at his sides as he advanced toward her. "Wait!" A pathetic note of panic squeaked from her throat. I can't leave. There isn't a body in that empty grave or soil to fill it. If whoever did this sees me on the streets, they'll surely finish the job.
Which is why my advice is to disappear, Miss Pritchard, came Castle's hollow reply. Go to a place where no one can find you.
Cold fear ate at Abigail's insides. That's impossible.
Who knew what fate would await her if she was left to her own devices? Should the brigands get hold of her, Abigail could end up slumped over in an alley with her throat cut, a trail of blood running down her limp hand to mingle with the grime and muck of London's cobblestone streets. A jumble of words left her mouth before she could pull them back, as perilous as a deadly avalanche.
Let me stay. You can take me on as a maid-of-all-work. I won't be any trouble.
She clamped her hands together in her lap to keep from spinning apart.
At least allow me to remain for a few weeks. I just need a place to hide until the danger passes.
Castle scowled, a knot forming low on his forehead. The danger will never pass, Miss Pritchard. If you knew what I know, that would be obvious.
Silence stretched so long that Abigail thought she might faint.
Only her pounding pulse in her ears and intermittent pops from the fireplace disrupted the charged pause. Damien Frost was the first to speak, running one hand over his beard with a thoughtful stroke. With the scale of this place, she would be lost in a litany of things to do. McGrath grunted. With only a few maids on staff, Mrs. Ramkin would welcome the help.
The ever-present furrow between Castle's black brows deepened.
I'll thank you both for keeping your machinations to your own households, not mine.
Why, I would be a great help to the existing staff, Abigail pleaded around a sour lump in her throat, and I am lovely company.
Castle's irises were iridescent blue jewels chipped with flecks of gold. I can imagine how you would make lovely company, Miss Pritchard, which is the very reason it would not be wise to keep you under the same roof as I am.
Did that sentence carry the entendre she thought it did?
Danger lurked in the dark streets of London.
Danger stood before her with a rogue's provocation.
Ice-blue eyes challenged her green ones, a tempestuous wave crushing over mossy emerald earth.
And if I leave, what would stop me from going to the police? Abigail's voice was nothing more than a hushed whisper. She trod on treacherous ground. Even broaching such a subject put her in unfathomable peril. One false step and she could end up a footnote in this man's endless catalogue of sins.
Castle stilled. Is that a threat, Miss Pritchard?
He stalked forward and stopped directly before her on the couch. His tall frame filled her vision and made Abigail's stomach shrivel.
The last person foolish enough to threaten me ended up without a tongue to produce such unwise utterances. As for your half-baked scheme, going to the police wouldn't do much good, as I have countless coppers in this city on my payroll. Such are the benefits of possessing vast resources. I pay people to look the other way and buy the respect of those who would oppose me. What I can't do is coerce a grown woman to come to her senses. Now tell me, do you wish to make yourself my enemy?
If she hadn't been in a sticky situation before, Abigail had just fallen into a barrel of pitch. That was not my intention, she said quickly. I only wanted you to reconsider sending me away so soon after being attacked, is all.
Abigail slid one hand beside her hip and covered the dagger handle with her fingertips. The weapon was smooth and cold to the touch. One movement would put it in her palm. One deft throw would pierce his flesh. But she wouldn't discover if Castle's blood ran as hot and crimson as hers that night. There were still 2 other men in the library. She was desperate, not stupid. Something shifted in his impenetrable features. The hint of weariness, or an emotion close to it, creased his mouth. Cautiously, Abigail's hand drifted back to her lap. Castle pointed to the library window panes. You have no concept of what is out there, he said in a guttural baritone. Being drugged is a small mercy compared to the other horrors that haunt dark alleyways waiting to prey upon innocent women like yourself. Women who find themselves wide awake staring directly into the face of danger.
Abigail swallowed and shook her head, which is why I would spare myself the dread of finding out. Please allow me to stay, if only for a little while.
How Abigail hated to beg. She was no stranger to fear or being on the receiving end of vile threats that promised nothing but degradation and suffering. Whatever this man spoke of did not frighten her half as much as the prospect of returning to her miserable life and the desolate future that awaited. That was a reality she could not accept, no matter the cost. Castle considered her. The way he tilted his head to one side and assessed her, all of her, from bedraggled auburn hair to worn scuffed boots and every inch between, scorched her skin with white-hot sparks. "Come on, Thomas, just give her over to Mrs. Rampkin and quit making the poor girl suffer," Frost said. Castle's Christian name was Thomas. The name did not sound like someone who lurked about gravesites in the dead of night. It was one more suited to a clean-shaven accountant, not the lethal man before her on the verge of deeming them enemies and crumbling Abigail's last chances of survival. "The lass can stay with me for a while," McGrath said from his seat near the pianoforte. "There are several spare rooms in which—" "Absolutely not," Castle cut in, curling his hands into painful-looking fists, and tossed a baleful glance to McGrath, then regarded her with black flame burning in his eyes. "You may remain here if you so choose." Abigail let out a quiet lungful of air. "Thank you." Crossing the room, Castle tugged a tasseled sable bell pull. "Don't thank me." He turned back to her, the fire casting half his face in shadow, the other half in a bright glow. "Because if you knew what the East End Syndicate was capable of, you would be begging me to bar the doors from the inside."